Kaivalya Kaivalya
Namaste. Welcome to Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam, or KYG as we all know it by now. Thank you so much for taking time to attend this class. Together we shall continue learning this magnificent element that we call Akasha, also known as space or ether. As always, such learning is done with deep reverence because they form the core fabric of who we all are. And therefore we learn it with an open mind and deep reverence in order to understand the secret of our existence, the secret of our inner potential, and the paths to live a life fully. And therefore let us begin this class with 3 ohms, allowing the 3 ohms, the sound and the vibrations of the ohms, to help our mind become into a state of, or rather come into a state of deep focus. So in the last couple of classes, we had in fact 3 classes, we had the privilege and the pleasure of exploring this magnificent temple, the Thillai Nataraja temple, situated in Chidambaram, south of India. Has so much of history to it. Now we shall try, in the classes from today onwards, we shall try and focus a little more on the element itself and try to make sense of how intricately this element is infused in our consciousness, in our bodies, in our minds, in our spirits, in our thoughts, in our words, in every manner possible. We all understand space as a container, and we'll perhaps come to it, but the beauty of this container, unlike any other container, because you have a container in which you put food and then you serve food from that container, correct? That's how we understand a container from. So that container doesn't get into the food, right? It simply holds the food. The taste of that container doesn't necessarily get into the food. It shouldn't. Ideally, if it's a glass bowl that you are going to use as a container to serve soup from, the glass bowl has nothing to do with the soup, the taste in the soup, correct? Or the consistency or anything. You can store the soup in the glass bowl for as long as you want. It shouldn't change anything in the soup. Of course, if it gets spoiled, it's a different matter, but it's not the fault of the bowl. This space is unlike that. This space gets into the content. It holds the contents, and it also becomes part of the content in the content. Content in the bowl, if you will. Space is the container for creation, but it is also an inherent part of creation. So in that sense, when we use the word container, it is only to understand one aspect of this element that we call Akasha. That's why space also is not the exact right interpretation, nor is container a perfect analogy, but it gives you an idea that as everything needs a stage or a container, and therefore the space or Akasha becomes that stage, that container. So let us, in today's class, explore some of the important aspects of the Akasha. I'm sorry if I sound a little distracted, but until half an hour ago we had, there was some repair work going on for our systems, and yesterday evening, today morning, today afternoon, so I have been very busy with them. So my Akasha space is a little cluttered, but nevertheless I didn't want to cancel this class because I had the time now, and I thought at least I'll launch some of my thoughts and let you ponder over it over the weekend, and we can take it from there. So let us go to my slides. Some of the important aspects of Akasha, before I even come there, is this text called Thiru Mandiram. It's a text like Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Now that has become very famous in the West. It was made famous by Swami Vivekananda. It was always there, but nobody knew it existed. But then Swami Vivekananda came to the West, talked about it, then he wrote about it. And one of his publications on Raja Yoga is one of the earliest publications on Yoga Sutras, and then followed so many scholars spoken about Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. In the same manner, there is the Thiru Mandiram, which is very less known in the yoga world. It is considered as a philosophy doctrine. It is considered as one of the basic doctrines of the Shiva Siddhanta. Shiva Siddhanta is the philosophy of Shiva, basically. And it is only in that Shiva Siddhanta, the philosophy of Shiva, is a version that is more relatable than Vedanta. But the essence of Vedanta and Shiva Siddhanta are the same, because they lead to oneness. The fundamental principle and the essence of both these, Shiva Siddhanta, Shiva means Shiva. Shiva is called Shiva here. The aspect of Shiva, the teachings of Shiva, the philosophy around Shiva. So it's called Shiva. Siddhanta is philosophy. So Shiva Siddhanta and Vedanta. Vedanta is the essence of the Vedas. Both these are in essence the same. But in Shiva Siddhanta, there is poetry, there is story, there's a way we can relate to it. There is an element of devotion and bhakti. And therefore it is much more easily relatable, but it is still not so easy to understand. You can relate to the concept of Shiva, but to understand certain aspects of Shiva Siddhanta needs tremendous discipline. When I say understand, it's not only intellectual understanding, assimilating it into practice and say, aha, now I know what they're talking about, right? That kind of thing is very, very difficult, because the disciplines underlying that Shiva Siddhanta is not so easy. We only know one part of it through what is called the agamas. I don't want to get too technical in it, because number one, I'm not an expert to go into that technicalities. I have a broad idea of that, but it will take us outside the scope of this particular topic at this point in time. We will revisit all of these, study more, because they are an essential part of the spiritual sadhana, especially the yoga path, and very little is known about it from a yogi's point of view, from someone who's practicing yoga, who has kind of experienced it to some extent, or experiencing it or studying it. So that perspective is very rare today. You have philosophical explanations of Shiva Siddhanta, but not the yogi's aspect, and the yogi, how will a yogi view it and study it? Because it is essentially, that entire philosophy is contained in this text that you're reading on the slide. I know it's a mouthful for those of you who don't know Sanskrit or Tamil, but Thiru means auspicious, Mandiram means mantra. The auspicious mantra, that's what it is, simply. Mandiram also means temple in Sanskrit, but this is a Tamil word, Thiru Mandiram. Mandiram is mantaram. So that is how in Tamil it is mantram. So Thiru Mandiram means the auspicious mantra, the most auspicious mantra, right? which we have talked about it in the last class. It's Shivaya Nama. Shivaya Nama, Shivaya Nama. So we'll come to that later when we talk about mantras. But Thiru Mandiram is about that, about the mantra of Shiva. What does it mean? And then this contains, it's an amazing text. It's one of the best gifts that we could have got, because without this text, without this kind of knowledge, we would have been completely lost, because nobody has done this kind of detailed work, opening up vistas for experimentation, for thought, for analysis. What is the scope of yoga? If one asks, then one has to study the Thiru Mandiram. The author is Yogi Tirumular. His name was Mular, and one day we will take it up for study. I want to restudy it in detail, and I'll study it with you all, like we did the Sundarakand. It's got 3,000 verses. So once you start it, then there is it'll just go on and on. But it is a most fascinating thing. If you're alive, then it's worth studying that before this life passes on, because we will take that knowledge into our next life, and it'll enrich and empower us, right? So that is the beauty, if there is another life for you all. I mean, this kind of knowledge is enough to give us the ultimate state of enlightenment. So Thiru Mandiram is that kind of text which was written on the steps of these temples, in the periphery grounds. Who knows where he sat and wrote this, right? It's very fascinating. Many hundreds and thousands of years ago he wrote this. So it's a very fascinating doctrine. And anyway, so in that, what is so fascinating about that, since I mentioned about him, and since we mentioned the temple, then we have to mention him only out of respect, because he has given us this, and this is going to pave the way for further learning. In that, you talk about space and transformation. He talks about the essence of his teachings. One of the things he talks about is what kinds of bodies will one attain when you practice this Thiru Mandiram, the highest of spirituality, going towards being oneness with Shiva. What happens through the path of yoga and devotion? Then see, the great siddhas and yogis like Tirumular, they do not differentiate between devotional, path of devotion and yoga. It is exactly the same. It is the fire of yearning that burns you, that same fire of yoga disciplines the body as well. So it's both together. It is a devotion, yoga of devotion, but not as the way as it is popularized today, and yoga is somehow different from the path of devotion. It was not like that in Tirumular. It is not like that in the philosophy of Shaivism. Shaiva Siddhanta is a path of yoga, the highest path of yoga, where devotion is the most crucial component. You cannot have yoga without devotion. Devotion to the higher self. There is poetry in that path. There is beauty in that path. There is, you're harnessing the energy of your emotions and bringing it into actual, in other words, you're applying that power of emotions and feelings into manifestation of the energy that you're seeking. So we will understand it more when we go into Shaiva Siddhantam. It is very difficult for me to explain this part to somebody who has not been exposed to Shaivism. It is something that we were exposed to as children when we were born. I was born into a very Shaivite family. And so I can relate to this because as we would say, it is in our very blood. So it's relatively easy to relate to it. However, if somebody is from the West and listening to this, you may not, and that's okay. But I'm just putting that disclaimer out there. It's very difficult for somebody to relate to this unless that door opens, that heart opens, and then you begin to experience the aspect of Shiva, which is not different from Christ or Buddha or anything. But then when we understand Thiru Mandiram, it's all about Shiva and his dance and Shakti and all of that poetry, the beauty, the intricacies of that all becomes more relatable. So I just thought I must share it there. So he talks about Stula Deha, which is the gross body. He says everybody has Sthula Deha. This is normal, right? We eat, we sleep, we grow old and we die. He says when you engage in this path of understanding the higher principles in life by harnessing all these elements and then understanding the Thiru Mandiram, the most auspicious mantra, in other words, the aspect of sound, the Akasha, once we begin to understand, then this Sthula Deha becomes Yoga Deha. Yoga Deha is yogic body. And there is descriptions of what yogic bodies are. You cannot have excess fat in the body. It's a description of Parvati who wanted Shiva. When she did 12 years of austerity, her body became frail and weak. That is how we see it. She didn't eat, she didn't starve herself, but that heat in her, the yogic heat in her, is such that it will burn away all the fat in the body. Eventually, that's how it will all happen. The body becomes what he would call, and there is another saint called Ramalinga, he calls it, and so on. So they call it the yogic body or yoga deha, where all the nadis are clean, and the moment you start doing asanas, prana becomes awake, or moment you just sit and start doing breathing, because the nadis are so clean, the body begins to tune into the higher energies. So that is yoga deha. And when that yoga deha is completely immersed in practice, then it becomes deva sharira or deva deha, the divine body. There is this is the kind of path they laid for you and me. If I want to practice yoga, where does it take me? It takes where I will attain the divine body. Okay, so we will study this. It's just fascinating, right? How even in a physical level, even at the body that I can relate to just as physical body, these yogis did not give up what we consider today as, oh, it's okay to become old, it's okay to have disease, it's okay to die. They say, no, this body is not meant to do those kind of things. There is so much more. You can use this body for much, much higher purposes, and then they spell it out through those texts. It's just a fascinating study. That's all I can say at this point. We have very, very little people who have actually proved that in their everyday life, right? But the attempt goes on, correct? The study goes on, the attempt to understand this and assimilate it and incorporate it into one's life. It's never too late, but the more we go into it, the more grace comes. We are able to incur the grace. We will get an experience. I have no doubt about it. So, this kind of spiritual practice, the whole concept of turning your ordinary physical body into that of a divine body, yogic body, is called Kaya. Kaya is body. Kaya means body. Sadhana means practice. The body practice. The practice that transforms your body. Okay? That is the essence of Thirumandiram, and Thirumandiram was written in the temple of Chidambaram, which represents the Akasha element. And that's why I wanted to place that text for you all right now. Just place it there as an offering for all of us as students of yoga, with a prayer that we will someday take it up for deep study. Some very fascinating things are mentioned there. But anyway, we'll come to that as we go along. Now, when we talk about the Akasha, I want to revisit certain aspects because there were questions that came to me, and then also it was just one talk I gave in the first at the temple, so I wanted to review some of those very important, very fundamental points in understanding this Akasha element. Because if we miss this understanding, we're missing the secret of understanding the creation and ourselves, right? So, the first thing is dance and Akasha. Why did they bring these two together, dance and Akasha? Now, it is just common sense, right? How would you explain it to a 10-year-old who is full of questions, right? What does that got to do? A very simple common sense thing is, for dance you need space. For any kind of movement you need space. And therefore, dance becomes an important part of Akasha. When you have space only, you can express dance. In a very, very small closet, you can sit and perhaps do a painting. You can sing with no space, I can just sing, right? When we come to sound, of course, you need space inside as well to express. But generally speaking, if, like I said, if you're explaining to a 10-year-old, you need space to move and to dance. And therefore, dance as a very physical movement that we can relate to when we have space. Right? That's why dance and Akasha are brought in together. So here we have to consider the aspect of dance and dancer. This is the only art, like I mentioned earlier, where the dance and the dancer cannot be separated. Some people had a problem grasping that. But it's very simple. Just think of it. Any other art, you can separate the art from the artist. If somebody is very good in cooking, you can say, give me the recipe. Take the recipe and walk away. The cook is not in that recipe. Right? The person who wrote the recipe is not in the recipe. He's separated. Painting. The person who painted is not in the painting. Right? You can take the painting away from the painter. You can separate the painter from, you can separate the pot from the potter. Right? He sits on his wheel and he creates a beautiful earthen pot for you. He gifts it to you. You take it and come home and put it up somewhere. The potter doesn't have to come with the pot. And thus it is with every art that you can think of, fine art. But there is one fine art, that is the dance and the dancer. Why are we thinking of fine arts only here? It is because fine arts relates to that part of the brain which does not know boundaries, which in today's science is considered the right side of the brain, the creative side of the brain. The left side of the brain is logical, analytical, argumentative. It needs points, it needs bullet points, it needs projector and slide, it needs words to see, it needs analogies, it needs similes, it needs all of that. Right? The analytical part of the brain does not understand faith, devotion, love and all of that. It doesn't understand. It says, talk to me in terms of chemicals, I can relate to that, it would say. The right part of the brain, however, is exactly the opposite. And that's why we have that beauty of merging the two. So the right side of the brain, not right side of the body, right side of the brain. Now in yoga, let me finish that point and I'll come to it because that could be a confusion. The right side of the brain is intuitive, is creative. It's like the Shakti side. She enjoys the beauty and the dance, the poetry, the emotions, the feelings, the imaginations, the creativity, and all of that is the right side of the brain. In that right side of the brain, there are no boundaries, there are no walls, there are no structures, there are no logical patterns of thinking. So when the right brain becomes fully active, then you are going into that creative mode. So when people or children are very imaginative, or you and I go into daydreaming, what's happening? Our right side is awake. When we are paying our bills, when we are talking to somebody, we have to talk intelligently, right? When we are talking to somebody doing our day-to-day work, our left side of the brain is active. Left and right side of the brain I'm talking about. Okay, this part is clear. And since the dance, since the dance is about the right side of the brain, is about fine arts, and fine arts is about the right side of the brain, and right side of the brain is about intuitive understanding of the cosmos. That's why we begin all of these studies with reverential manner, because in that reverence, the left side of the brain doesn't understand what is reverence. So what do you mean reverence? Why can't I just sit and think? You have to calm that conscious mind there, that analytical mind a little bit and say, all right, now let's open up a little more, think a little more. Even Albert Einstein had that beauty where he stopped after a while and he pondered on the cosmos and the mysteries of creation, right? Some of his quotes are fascinating. So that was his right brain talking. And therefore the dance and the dancer concept, the fine arts concept, is considered to explain these things, because only that part of the brain can even relate to our understanding. And we need both. We need similes, analogies and all from the left side, but then at one point the right brain takes over. So when we talk of dance and dancer and all of this, we need that because the right brain can understand it. Okay, before I proceed further, Up till now, if you have attended my classes in KM and yoga classes, you would have heard of Ida and Pingala. So Ida is the left side, Ida is the creative side, Ida is the Shakti side, Ida is the introvert side, Ida is about emotions and feelings, Ida is the moon, romance, love, the left side of the body. The right side of the body is the sun. He is outgoing, he is argumentative, he is extrovert, he wants to achieve things in life, he wants things very clear in his path. He considers strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, threats, SWOT analysis he does, and he goes out to it. That is the sun, right side. So you will get confused now because I say right side of the body is the sun, and then I say right side of the brain is creative and intuitive. Shouldn't it be the other way around? You get what I'm saying? So here's what happens. This is the Pingala Nadi. This is the Ida Nadi. This is my left hand, the hand which has my watch. Right, left hand. And this is the right hand. So this side is the left, this side is the right. At this point in our body, in the Agnya Chakra, the right side goes into the left hemisphere of the brain, and the left nadi goes into the right side of the brain. So when we are activating the left nadi, the entire left body and the right part of our brain is what is stimulated. Because in the Agnya Chakra, they cross, finally they cross. There are many times they cross, okay? But in the Agnya Chakra, they do the final crossing. That means this nadi goes this way, this nadi goes this way, and so the left nostril activates the right side of the brain, the right nostril activates the left side of the brain. And therefore, we are still consistent in our understanding that the right side of the brain is about intuition. Why? Because it is connected to the Ida nadi. The left side of the brain is about analytical, argumentative, extrovert kind of brain, the man brain, and that is connected to the right side of the body, in other words, the right breath. Breath plays such an important role, okay? So one has to understand that and don't get confused saying, hey, but you said the sun was the right side, now you're saying the right side is intuitive and creative. That is because the right side is connected to the left nadi. And the left brain is connected to the right nadi. Where does that switch happen? In the third eye, they cross. That crossing, the final crossing of those two is what triggers that spot. Is, for reference sake, we say pineal gland. That is not the pineal gland, it's a reference point. Pineal gland is incidentally gets activated because of the third eye getting activated. It is incidental in that process. And therefore, it releases molecules and gives you all that experience. But because of the third eye being activated, which is in the subtle body, that this happens. The pineal gland, the pituitary, all of them get activated, and a whole host of hormones are secreted by the brain. That gives us psychedelic experiences, and we see lights and hear sounds and all of that. So this is for the. So let's come back to the dance. I hope that part is clear. So the dance and the dancer, that is why the fine art, they took among the fine arts, they took one of the best ones. One of the best ones was the dance and the dancer. Because you cannot separate the dance from the dancer. So when you're seeing a dance, when you're experiencing a dance, the dancer has to be part of it. And the beauty of this fine art is, when the dancer stops, then he is no longer the dancer and there is no longer the dance. So what has happened? He has absorbed the dancer and the dance into himself. Please remember, this is a secret. When we say everything, Shiva absorbs it into him, everything comes from him, what does that even mean, right? This is what it means. Do a few steps of dance, right? And then your kid will say, hey dad, you're doing a dance, or hey mom, you're doing a dance, you're a dancer. You stop and ask your child, where is the dancer now? He says, I don't know, you were dancing, you were a dancer, but a few minutes ago, now you're not the dancer. You ask the child, where is the dance? He says, I don't know. Both are in you, but you absorbed the dancer and the dance into you. You are still there. So that's the beauty of understanding the dancer and the dance. The important part of understanding this, the creation emanates from a source and then it gets absorbed into that source. When it emanates from the source, it is not separate from the source becomes part of that emanation. And the source is still there because it has to absorb it, right? Let me explain a little more. I am a dancer. Let's say I am moving, I'm dancing, okay? So my hands are moving, I'm dancing in bliss, and creation happens. Shiva, okay? So Shiva is dancing, creation happens. So I'm now the dancer, but I am also the one who is creating this dancer. And there is, of course, the dance going on. So there are three people. One who is watching the dancer. That is Sunder. If Sunder is the one, Sunder has created this dancer. Sunder is, and through the dance, he is enabling creation. But then Sunder decides it's time to absorb everything into him, so he stops dancing. So this dancer gets absorbed into Sunder. The dance, creation, also gets absorbed into Sunder. So Shiva is the dancer. With the dance he becomes a creation, but he is, in addition to these two, he is also there. That is what is explained in Vedanta as well. Brahman becomes a creation doesn't mean Brahman is now gone and everything you see is Brahman, there is no other Brahman. So there is another Brahman, not another Brahman, but Brahman, it's like being the cake and eating it too. You have all the raw materials, you mix the raw materials and you get a pudding or a cake. Now where are the raw materials? You will say it's all gone into the cake, right? What if you are taking the raw materials, making the cake, and you look around and the raw materials are exactly where they are in the same amount as if untouched? Now that's difficult to imagine because it's really not possible in this dimension. But that is what Shiva is. He becomes the dancer, and the dance becomes the creation, but he is apart from the dancer and the dance. That is the beauty of that consciousness. And therefore he is able to absorb. He stops dancing. Dancer merges into him, creation merges into him. And all that remains is Tat Tvam Asi. That thou art. That is ultimate. There you call it Shiva, Brahman, anything, whatever, it really names are of no consequence because that is all beyond name, form, everything. That is just Tat. Vedanta calls it Tat. Right? Thiru calls it Chi. Chi for Shiva. Chi, the power of Chi. Sankhya calls it Jna. So like this there are names. So the dance and the dancer is a very fascinating. Please meditate on this. Every time I get a chance, I get new insights when I just sit and think of the dance and the dancer, looking at the trees, looking at a river flowing by or the grass and say everything is actually alive, even a piece of rock. You look at it and say this is dancing, it's part of a bigger dance. It's playing a role in a cosmic dance. So and then you become aware of some very beautiful energies that you can connect to when your right brain becomes active automatically. So that's the importance of dance and the dancer. One of the highest forms of contemplation and meditation that can emerge from this. So that is the dance and the dancer, and therefore the creation and the creator happens, but the creator, because the dancer becomes a dance, he is also separate. So I thought I explains that, right? So now where does this dance happen? It happens in space. And therefore the need of ambalam, a stage, or ambaram, space. Ambaram is space, ambalam is stage. One is in Tamil, one is in Sanskrit, but in essence they mean the same thing. I need space to move, to form the dance, right? I need a stage, a platform with space where I can perform my dance. So both these in essence mean the same thing. And therefore the name Chidambalam, Chit Ambaram, Chidambaram, Digambaram, as I explained earlier, Shiva is Digambaram. For him, space is his clothing, correct? And so, dance happens in space. And that's why Akasha and dance go together. Much more easily relatable to us. Okay? Now, I want to leave you all today with just these another 2 or 3 points that I want you to contemplate upon. There is what we see is rhythm. What is dance? What is the fundamental, what is the foundation of a dance? Just simple. What is the foundation of a dance? If somebody sings a long, melodious, slow sloka or a chant, you will sit in meditation, you're not going to move. What do you need to move? You need a rhythm, right? A rhythm is the basis of a dance. So if the dance represents creation, there must have been a basic movement, a basic rhythm, or what I call a vibration. What is vibration? Is simply, again, same thing, right? Spandam. The Sanskrit word that is used is spanda. Spanda means vibration. Nobody knows the cause, right? The cause is, of course, there is why this happens, or why it happened, or why it happens. We can only make incomplete, insufficient guesses at, but we leave that. But what happens is, for the dance to happen, in other words, for creation to come forth, it comes, what is the source? The source is vibration. There is a vibration in the Akasha. And that vibration becomes a rhythm. That rhythm causes movement. The way we understand it. Today, if I want to dance, I need a beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's all I need. Once I get that beat, then I take few steps. Correct? When you tell your 3-year-old to dance, what do? You start clapping. And then the child starts dancing. It needs the clap. It needs the rhythm. That's your basic understanding. The beauty in creation is that rhythm or vibration is intelligent vibration. It's not chaotic, as some scientists are pointing out. It's not chaotic. It's not random. There is an intelligence in that vibration. There is intelligence in that movement. It is not random. Then there is another one. I think I made a mistake there. Anyway, never mind. Then there is rhythm and vibrations. Now, what is that vibration? Does it straight away come in the form? How does that come? What is this clap? It's a sound, right? That rhythm or vibration manifests in the form of sound. It is an intelligent sound. What is when we say rhythm, you're talking of a drummer beating on the drums, correct? Western drums, Eastern drums, African drums, it really doesn't matter. So he's creating a rhythm, a vibration of sorts, yes. But what is that? How does that express itself? Through sound. So there is intelligent sound vibrations which causes the vibrations to come forth and eventually form creation. And creation comes forth from that subtle state. It comes gently down to forming the physical reality that you see around. That is the beauty of this. That is the depth of this. This is how profound it is. That is why we pay attention to sounds. The quality of sound, the tone of the sound matters to us, even in conversations. You could be standing in front of the most handsome man or the most beautiful woman on earth, and yet if there is no intelligence in their speech, or if they are screaming or shouting, or if something doesn't click in terms of the sound or communication, then your idea of their beauty falls down. You will say, oh, okay, no, I don't know what people see in them. I can't. I'm just giving a very silly example, I guess. It just came to my mind. The reason I'm saying that is because sound is so valuable, so subtle. It really defines your personality by the tone, by the sound patterns. In other words, the intelligent sounds, which in other words means language, right? That's why poetry is so beautiful. That's why songs are so beautiful, lyrics are so beautiful, and then comes a rhythm to add to that, to add to the energy of the lyrics, and then comes melody. It's so the rhythm, lyrics, and melody together becomes the bhava, the raga, and the tala. The lyrics release the bhava or the emotions. The rhythm releases the tala, and the melody releases the raga. So your bhava, raga, and tala, and together you begin to experience a heightened level of awareness. So sound as music, sound as words, sound as pure vibration, sound as rhythms, and you take it more and more subtle, and we'll explore this again in the next class, because that forms the basis of where does a sound emanate in us and why is sound so much more, so important. When I say sound, it means I'm talking of the fundamental vibration that gives birth to sound, and sound, in other words, gives birth to combinations of these vibrations, and intelligent sound happens, words are formed, and then vision comes, and therefore an object materializes. It all emerges from the primordial vibration. And the Sanathana Dharma, the ancient seers, the sages, recognize that sound as a sound where you cannot attach meaning to it, because then you're conditioning the sound and limiting it to your understanding of the meaning and your imagination of what it is. Correct? And therefore they introduce this word, Om, Akara and Ukara. The Makara, is simply the ending of it. Akara and Ukara. Akara and Ukara. That is what Thiru Mandiram, Tirumular calls Chi and Va, Shiva. He says Akara and Ukara is exactly Chi and Va. Chivam, is simply the lips closing back. It's an important component of the sound, but it just finishes that sound pattern. But Akara and Ukara is the most important thing, which is static energy, kinetic energy. Both are created in that. One is static, one is kinetic. And then comes the whole creation. So is Shiva still, or is Shiva moving? He is both still and moving, which you and I cannot do as a dancer. If I am dancing, I am moving, correct? I cannot say I am still and I am moving. I can't. Because I have identified myself with the body, and therefore when I dance and my body moves, now what is happening to Sunder? Sunder is moving, right? But in Shiva is still and he also moves. And when he moves, he is called Shakti. When he is still, as he is still and moving, he is also called Shiva. And therefore Shiva Shakti is a concept of stillness and movement both existing simultaneously in Akasha. In space, there is stillness and there is movement. There is vibration and there is intelligence in that vibration. And thus we have what is creation. I know this is kind of a heavy subject, so and perhaps I'm not doing justice to it, but I at least wanted to voice my thoughts and see how this comes out. And I couldn't go beyond this in my preparation of points today. I said, let me see how this pans out. Please feel free to write your comments or questions, and I'll try and address it, because this is a fundamental thing we have to understand. This is the source of creation, as given to us by the sages and the seers. It finally goes into vibration, and finally we will find that vibrations, where does it even emerge from? We'll explore that when we understand what kinds of sounds, what types of sounds exist in us, and where does it emerge from, and how does it express itself. We'll come to that in the next class. Because when we want to understand Akasha, my dear friends, it's all about sound. There is really nothing else. It's all about sound. I don't mean to make you paranoid, but pay attention to the kind of sounds that enter your body. Pay attention to the sounds that leave your body. I'm not here to qualify certain sounds as good or bad, because everything owes its origin to that primordial sound Om. So this good and bad is all social, culture based, it's time bound. 50 years from now, what we say is bad might become good, or what we say is good might become bad, those kind of things. So don't worry about that at this point. Just worry about sounds that you can tune into, and sound that causes disturbance in your consciousness. Know that when that happens, then you are actually creating disturbance in your very core. So a good trick that I do, I perhaps mentioned it earlier, is whenever there is any part of, whether I'm watching something on television, let's say, we can't avoid it today, it's very much part of our lives, correct? We learn a lot from it, we learn a lot from YouTube videos and so on and so forth. But even in the best of movies, in the best of videos, even if I'm watching Shiva Puran, let's say, on video, there are parts which disturb me. So what do? I simply mute it. Both Maya and I, we mute it. So the sound vibrations are completely cut off, and therefore the impact of that scene is reduced greatly. Then I'm simply watching, not knowing what's going on, and I feel it's so funny. Now I'm paying attention to what kind of clothes they are wearing and this and that. But when the sound comes, then what I'm watching on the screen becomes a small part, but that sound is recreating an imaginative scenario in my mind, and the brain enacts that scenario as if it is experiencing it. Mirror neurons. And therefore we are simulating the entire experience, an uncomfortable experience on the screen. We are simulating it inside ourselves, right? You want to stop that, because then you will stop a great deal of disturbance that is caused because of sound. So just mute it. Mute your advertisements, mute. Then you will find that the impact or the influence of that on your brain, subconsciously, unconsciously, is reduced. It has no strength. It won't last. You won't even remember that film or that part of the movie. Within a year, you will completely forget it, because it has not really imprinted itself in the form of vibrations in your consciousness. Stop that. And that is why Baba would say, and I'll end with that, that's why Baba would say, don't gossip, don't speak negative. That's why I said in the last class as well, when I say sorry, you would get upset, because those kind of words that we utter, please help me, I don't know, we'll talk about all this, because it's very, very important, because these are the kind of realities we create around us. And then we expect a God from somewhere to help us out. And that kind of reality is not real. You and I are architects of this reality. Where does it all begin? It begins in Akasha, in your space, in my space, in the form of vibrations, intelligence, forming. So let us explore that and understand it, because like I always say, Kaivalya Marga class is how we can relate all this in our daily lives into a spiritual practice and improve ourselves. We have to transform ourselves. Merely intellectual understanding of this Vedanta speaks this Agama Shastra talks of this, and I collect all these quotes from different sources and just present it to you. It may not really be as useful as understanding the essence and saying, all right, let me start practicing this in small steps. Once you become aware, then you begin to respect sound. When you begin to respect sound, sound in turn will begin to form those vibrations in your consciousness that will be most conducive for your spiritual growth. And thus, you automatically invoke those divine Shaktis from within, the divine energies that we study as part of Devi Khadgamala and the Sri Chakra. They're all sounds, they're all sound energies eventually. That is the beauty of it. So I hope this class was useful, and pardon me if it sounded like some points I had to repeat. But for me personally, I think of this as often as I can. Pay attention to sounds. I become very sensitive to sounds, whether it is the sound of wind or the sound of the rain or the water, or sound of people talking, not just the content, but just also the tone, and so on and so forth. And therefore, then I also pay attention to the chants of mantras. Some of the mantras are so beautifully worded. They might come just like a simple poetry, but there is so much of beauty and energy in that. That's why I was attracted to Kala Bhairavam, and I'm teaching it as a dance, because it is not just the dance and movement, but you're chanting something and learning, and that power in that chant is releasing something very deep inside it. To me, it's been a very cleansing experience so far, just recording for that and doing it so many times each verse. It cleanses. Something inside feels so cleansed, clean, I mean. And so there is some kind of a subconscious, unconscious cleansing that happens because there is a power in those sounds, the way they are worded and so on. So therefore there are chants, there are mantras in these ancient languages, because they were all based on power of sounds. That is how the language of Sanskrit and Tamil was even formed. We don't speak that kind of Tamil today. So I won't say today's Tamil is the ancient Tamil. Sanskrit more or less has retained its structure and integrity, but it kind of came down to different languages. So most of the languages in India owe their origin to some form of Sanskrit, correct? And Sanskrit itself owes a lot of its origin to Tamil, being the oldest language and so on. And so the oldest languages were formed because just sounds. Like the baby talks to you because she's trying to communicate something, and she makes sounds, right? That sound was very intelligently carved, shaped, sculpted, if you will, into power-packed letters, aksharas. So when we chant, we are actually releasing those energies, systems in our body. That kind of energy that will help us reach out into another dimension very easily. We have failed to understand the importance of that. I'm trying to understand as much as I'm talking. That's why I'm so interested. I get so excited, if you will, sharing that knowledge, because it really has helped me so much in the spiritual path. And Baba also talks about Namasmarana, which is why chant the name, chant the name, chant the name. Why? Because there are bijaksharas in those names. There are sound energies in those names that beautifully. It's like drilling with a power screwdriver, if you will, an electric screwdriver. It just drills into your subconscious, unconscious, and clears off the dross. Anything is possible with sound. Any miracle is possible with sound. I believe this. And I hope you do too. So let us bring this class to an end on that wonderful note. Over the weekend, try and contemplate on this dancer space and share your thoughts as comments on YouTube. It can help everyone. Ask a question and let's keep that discussion going, because in helping each other we actually help our higher self, which is all goes back to that one vibration emanating from Shiva. Let us end this class with one Om and three Shantis. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.